Now, given that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are really tied up with a lot of Star Wars projects behind closed doors, we also know that the Ahsoka series and, of course, Season 2 of that show are really going to set up everything related to the retelling of Heir to the Empire, as well as other aspects of the New Jedi Order and more. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future Star Wars updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. Now, there's a lot of things going on between George, John, and Dave, given that they are working together as a trio. We also have Tony Gilroy working on Andor Season 2 and other mystery Star Wars projects, and that, of course, is going to be a big part of this subject today and how it actually pertains to Jon Favreau. Now, we discussed just yesterday about how Dave Filoni really debunked this rumor that was going around about Jon Favreau leaving Lucasfilm entirely and how that is not really happening. Jon is still sticking around and developing many Star Wars shows. And recently Favreau did indeed elaborate on something related to focusing on quality-driven shows and moving away from specific other Star Wars shows, and exactly what this really all entails. We'll be talking about that a little bit later as well. Now, we know that Kathleen Kennedy is not going to be involved on a creative level for anything else moving onwards throughout 2023 and beyond, except so far for the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew. Those are her projects by contract, so she's got a lot of creative input on those, and I think that's why a lot of fans, including myself, am really remaining skeptical about those two projects, because they are Kathleen Kennedy driven, let's be honest here. So, moving on to the next big thing, we know that everything related to, of course, John and Dave have been very much difficult. It's a very, long process that they have to make sure that they don't make many major mistakes. However, with Jon Favreau recently engaging in many interviews related to The Mandalorian Season 3, he eventually went on to unveil more about his future at Lucasfilm. Jon went on to state the following to the entire fandom. I think as every fan knows that this franchise is very wide and endless, and here at Lucasfilm I have been working on multiple projects at once and we began having conversations on how we can improve quality-driven shows, which is why I can say with full confidence that I will be leaving some of the unannounced projects that I have been working on for a little while now in order to focus on other Star Wars shows to make those projects hold more quality to them. We have a great and talented team that will be joining us to help out with the projects that I will no longer be participating in, but I think it was the right move to focus on quality instead of quantity for myself as a creator and as a writer. I know we now have Tony Gilroy becoming a part of many stories, but I really am not allowed to get into that, but what I can say is that as a writer, I won't be involved in every single story as much, and decided to shift to focus on the stories I felt were the most necessary and important to the franchise. So let me just stop right here for 1 second about what Favreau is saying, is that he's not leaving Lucasfilm entirely. That's not what he's saying here. Let's be very clear. I want to make that very much direct with the fans right now, is that he's not stepping down from Lucasfilm like how you think, and he's not quitting Star Wars in the general sense, like Dave Filoni even pointed out yesterday. But what is happening, as it turns out, is that Favreau is lessening the amount of projects that he's working on, and he's leaving a handful of Star Wars live-action shows, and even partially some animated series out there. Now, which specific shows is he actually leaving? That's a big mystery as of right now. I'm sure that we will be able to find this out as the months roll by. But we know one thing about Jon Favreau is that he works very closely with Disney CEO Bob Iger, and Bob Iger himself even said openly to the audience that he wants to focus on more quality-driven projects, specifically made by Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and a lot of these other creators that are very passionate-driven. And so that's the biggest thing right now, is that they want to focus on quality instead of quantity. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're canceling a lot of other shows out there. It's just that for the John and Dave stuff, they want to connect them to the more quality-driven shows, to really focus on having a more, I guess you could say, narrow view or vision on where Star Wars is going to go, to kind of just get more involved in the details and really kind of create more quality-driven products out there. So On to the next thing. We know that Favreau is also heavily involved with the lore and a lot of retcons coming our way, and how Tony Gilroy is going to become more and more involved with upcoming Star Wars shows. And you know what? As much as I love John and Dave, and I love these guys, they're fantastic. Getting Tony Gilroy on board of shows past Star Wars Andor, I think is a fantastic move. Now, he's a great creator, he's a great writer, I think that he is a great visionary. Whether you love or hate Andor, he is going to be involved in other aspects of Star Wars, like the mythology, the criminal underworld, stuff around those lines. It's not like Tony Gilroy is only going to make Andor-ish stuff in Star Wars. They want to bring Tony Gilroy on board to take over those projects that Jon Favreau is now parting away from. Again, we will be covering this, exactly which projects Favreau left to open up for Gilroy and other creators out there. Moving on. He goes on to elaborate further. I will, however, remain as executive producer for some of those other projects that I left to overlook them, but will not be creating them. Sometimes to create a perfect batch of shows, you have to treat it like a bullseye. You have to focus on one dedicated goal in mind instead of several to create a quality-driven product for your fan base, and that's what I will be doing. Apart from what Favreau stated, this all alludes to Favreau parting ways from only Star Wars projects as a writer and is trying to reduce the workload at once to create a series of quality-driven shows. This may or may not be related to the recent Mando Season 3 backlash and disappointment among fans. And yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder, is this really related to the Mando Season 3 backlash? You know, I don't know if it is or isn't, but one thing is for certain is that it does seem a little convenient or a little bit odd that this is coming right after Mando Season 3's ratings are not doing all that well, especially the fan reception is not doing all that well either. And a lot of it had to do with, believe it or not, Kathleen Kennedy herself. She did not allow John and Dave to have the creative freedom that they wanted during the scripting phase, but she was not involved during the principal photography phase, just to be clear. So that's a very big and interesting thing in development. I think that's where all of, the talk about John leaving Lucasfilm really came from, is that he's only dropping out of some shows, but not out of backlash from what it seems, or the fact that he's losing passion, but to focus on making the other shows that he's truly honored to be a part of to be more quality driven. And that, guys, I gotta say, is very thoughtful of him. He's looking out for the audience, he's looking out for creators, and other creators are going to step on board of Lucasfilm to kind of fill in the gaps, to add on to the roster of creators. Again, John and Dave, I mean, they were handling a workload of Star Wars projects, and Disney may very well feel that that workload could very well be pressuring them on really kind of not focusing correctly on some of the Star Wars projects. When in reality, though, let's be honest, Mando Season 3 underperformed because of Kathleen Kennedy's interference. But I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I'll catch you guys next time.
From night to moon, we hear them moans again.